Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar event. My name is Justin Peter. I'm director of Quest Nature Tours, which is the natural history branch of Worldwide Quest, and we're very pleased to have you join us today on one in a series of many webinars that we've been holding over the last little while. And today's a very special event because we get to learn about some very interesting findings on humpback whales. Just to give you an idea a little bit about how this webinar will work, we expect the event will last about, the talk itself rather, will last about 30 to 35 minutes. And following the talk, we will have a question period with our speaker, Sherry Kirkvold, who I will introduce in just a moment. If you hear my voice, or you see my face rather, but you don't see a slide right now, you should be seeing a slide on your screen with the fin of a humpback whale. If you see my face, but you don't see that slide, it's possible that the PowerPoint slide is minimized in your window. So what you want to do, if you don't see the whale's fin, below my talking head, there should be the gray bar at the bottom of the screen. You may have some, three little dots or three little arrows, and you can click on that, and that should pop back the view or pop the whale's fluke into view. So that's just a little bit of troubleshooting for you today. I mentioned that we'd be hosting a question and answer period following Sherry's talk, and you can pose questions to Sherry during the talk. We have in your GoToWebinar console, you will see, if you look carefully, there is a little questions tab. It's the word questions in white on a gray background with an arrow. And if you pop that arrow, if you click that arrow, you'll have a little space there where you can enter your questions there. And following Sherry's talk, you can enter questions as they arise, as they occur to you or cross your mind. And I will be curating your questions for Sherry. And so just keep that in mind. If you have any technical issues, you can use the chat tab, which is just below the questions. If you see me and you don't hear me, well, hopefully you hear me, you can always exit the webinar and re-enter it. And also just to know that this webinar is being recorded, and we will make this recording available to all of you for later viewing or reviewing, or if you have to leave early, you can catch the part that you missed. And you'll also be welcome to forward the link to the recording to anyone else who you think might be interested. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker, who is Sherry Kirkvold. And as Director of Quest Nature Tours, I've had the pleasure of working with Sherry for a number of years. And Sherry's been a very popular Quest Nature Tour leader in many different places, in Honduras, Yukon, Alaska, Belize and Guatemala, Cuba, and Iceland as well. Sherry brings a deep love of nature along with her more than 30 years of experience as a geographer and naturalist. She's worked in the national, provincial, and regional park systems in British Columbia. She has also worked as a curator of natural history at the Vancouver Museum and in public programs at the Royal British Columbia Museum in Victoria. And in addition, Sherry has run her own business specializing in heritage interpretation and taught that subject area at several colleges, as well as courses on environmental stewardship. And Sherry, are you there to tell us about humpback whales?
I'm here. Well, unlike Justin, I'm going to say good morning, everyone. We're all in different time zones here. Yeah, so today I'm going to talk a bit about humpback whales. And is my, just check first, my screen is all showing properly?
We see your screen, Sherry. Well, we just need to see you.
Oh, you can't see me. Okay, share my webcam. The
Yes,
trouble
please.
is, I can't get a cursor. Oops, that just changed slides. I can't get a cursor to get to my webcam. So you might not, when I just put return, then it just advanced my slide. So yeah,
all right.
I can't. Yeah, sorry.
All right. I will.
Maybe try hitting escape out of your presentation temporarily.
that just advances my slide as well.
The escape button?
Share my webcam.
There you are,
Perfect,
Sherry.
thank you.
Good to see you. And thank you, Sam, in the background doing our technical. And
are we good?
thank you, Sherry, and welcome, and thanks so much for speaking to us today.
All right, so today I'm going to talk a bit about humpback whales, some of the new research taking place, and then also a bit about citizen science. So I first started working on small vessels on the West Coast in about 1994. And at that time, it was unusual to see a humpback whale unless you were visiting up in Alaska. And it's always exciting when you happen upon them. There's not really anything I love more than spending time with whales. And this dates back to when I was working on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And here I am meeting a gray whale back in the 80s. And it fluked right beside us. And my instinct was just to reach out to it. Now today there are many more whales, and to understand why, we need to know a bit about whaling on the coast. So while there was indigenous whaling in a few areas, the scale of it didn't affect whale populations. Several whaling stations were operating in BC between 1905 and 1967. These are the remains at Rose Harbor on Haida Gwaii. And it's estimated when they first opened that there were about 20,000 humpback whales in the North Pacific. And the last whaling station closed in 1967. There were, when that happened, there were about 12 to 1,400 whales left. And many other whale species were also hunted, including blue, fin, sperm, and sei. And at the time that the BC stations opened, the North Pacific right whales had already been wiped out. So the return of humpback whales is one of our great success stories, with the population rebounding almost to historic numbers. So it's estimated there are about 18,000 in the North Pacific now. So in the area where I work the most, whale researchers counted about 40 whales when they first started, and now they have a population of about 500. So in this graphic, you can see this is the BC whaling stations. The humpback whales are shown in red. So if you look over to the left, that's the early days. They were hit really hard, really fast. And then as their populations disappeared, other whales were targeted. And you know, today we look back and we just wonder how we thought it was okay to decimate these huge animals. And I can't help but think that here in BC, we still think it's okay to cut down 1,000-year-old trees in ancient forests. And maybe we'll look back on that in the same way. So of course, it's always a wonderful tourism opportunity when conducted following whale watching regulations and being considerate of whales. How big is a humpback whale? Well, here's a lovely quest group in Iceland standing in front of a life-size illustration. So think bus-sized, about 40 to 50 feet, weighed around 25 to 30 tons. I'm not sure if Bev is with us here, but she definitely has her own fashion sense. This is a life-size tail model. So it's about 15 feet across, and we'll talk a little bit about the patterning later. So most often it's a blow that alerts us to the fact that there's a whale in the area. And this misty plume can go about 20 feet up above the whale. And I'm going to now try to do my first little bit of technical challenge, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it because I can't access the cursor again. So I'm wondering if over there you could play video number 1. Is that possible?
Hey Sherry, I don't have access to the videos because I'm not the presenter. So why don't you,
I have.
can you try making it not full screen?
One of our friends who works at. How do you get sponsors? Because I think that is more realistic. Is creating content that sponsors would like want to get involved in. Because listen, trying to produce this, I've produced things for broadcast.
Other
It's a
sound
long-
altogether.
it's a long haul, right? But working on things for sponsorships, like for example, me,
Hmm.
Somebody
that
else is.
is something where, I'm doing the heavy research.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and make myself the presenter. I'll play video 1 and then I'll make you the presenter again.
All right. This all worked great in rehearsal, but
Of course it did.
somebody else's audio coming in though?
That's where my heart lies.
Nope, just me.
Now I'm frozen.
I can see your slide again.
Yeah, no, I'm completely frozen. There we go. I'm just going to try and come out. All right, there we go. We're back. Sorry about the technical difficulties. So the lovely sound of those whales is often what draws your first attention. And I call this one a rain blow. So when you see the blows from different whales, they can actually have different shapes, and that can help you identify what whale it might be. This photo shows the heart shape of a blow just emerging. And that's because humpback whales have 2 nostrils. And that's one of the differences between toothed whales and the baleen whales. So toothed whales have the single blowhole, and baleen whales have the double. Another common thing to see is the back of a whale as it surfaces to breathe. And humpback whale takes its name from the hump shape that their dorsal fin makes as it dives into the water. These dorsal fins come in a variety of shapes, with this one being a little more distinctive than most. And after several breaths at the surface, a humpback may take a deeper feeding dive. And it's always exciting to see that tail go down, but it does mean that the whale will likely remain underwater for a while. And in some cases, when a whale is feeding at a certain depth, you can pretty much predict exactly when it's going to come back to the surface. And a typical dive usually lasts about 4 to 10 minutes. And then sometimes we'll also see the other end of a whale. And when it does this, we call it a spy hop. And the whale basically comes to take a look around above the water. Now looking closer, we can see fist-sized bumps called tubercles with tiny hairs called vibrissae. And of course, mammals have hair. And it's thought that these little hairs might help the whale to feel different vibrations in the water column, kind of like an extra sense to help them build a finer picture of their surrounding environment. And if you look closely, you might be able to see the tiny pink whale lice. There's some right beside some of those bumps. And here you can see whale barnacles. So the round white circles are barnacle scars. And these hard white barnacles live only on humpback whales. And there's also a second barnacle, a gooseneck variety, the ones with the long necks, living on top of the other barnacles. So there's 2 major groups of whales, the baleen whales and the toothed whales. And here you can see the baleen, which sits in rows in the whale mouth. It's made of keratin, just like our fingernails. And so water's taken in when eating, and then it's forced out through those baleen plates, and that captures the food, whether it be krill or small schooling fish. And since whales don't have teeth, it's difficult to determine their age, but scientists believe they typically live about 80 to 90 years. So humpback whales are the only whales that have these long pectoral fins. And those can be about 15 feet long, or about a third of the whale's body length. So the scientific name Megaptera means large winged, and it refers to these long wing-like pectorals. It's believed that these long fins help them to spin underwater, such as when they're making bubble nets. And some modern day wind turbines are actually being designed with the same wavy edges as these fins. So I'd like to talk a little bit about research taking place on the West Coast. So when research started, there were very few humpbacks, and so most of the research focused on killer whales. We'd already learned about the various killer whale populations through photo identification of their dorsal fins and saddle patches. And then one of the early research stations, Orca Lab on Hansen Island, was started in 1970 by Paul Spong. And their goal was to study whales in a non-invasive way by observing them and listening to them on fixed hydrophones. Now from the outside, it looks like a small shack, but it's filled with sophisticated equipment. Now it varies by year, but they operate a video monitoring station on Craycroft Island, as well as networked hydrophones. So when that's operational, you can log on via your computer to listen to and watch for the whales. And there's also archived footage of the archived files of the best footage. And then Janie Ray and Herman Mutter, who were working at Orca Lab, started a new station up in the Great Bear Rainforest on Gill Island called Cetacea Lab, and they started that in 2001. So they started with the idea of researching killer whales, but found they had arrived just at the time that the humpback population was starting to rebound. And that became a major component of their study. And then fin whales started to return as well, and they followed the same philosophy of non-invasive research. Then in 2017, Janie Ray opened a new station, also in the Great Bear Rainforest on Fin Island. And with the increasing possibilities of first oil tankers and then LNG tankers, this station was well positioned to do a baseline study of whales who could end up being on a tanker route. So here's its early days. This is it last year. It's taken a few years to properly equip this station, and my presentation is going to focus mostly on the research coming out of this one. So one of the new methods of research is the sampling of whale breath using drones to fly through. And so this is done, of course, with proper permits. Now, a few years ago, I was, back there. A few years ago, I was down in the Baja in Mexico visiting the gray whale lagoons, and I happened upon the snotbot team. So of course, I went straight over and started to chat them up. And they told me that they fly petri dishes through the exhaled snot, and that blow contains a treasure trove of valuable biological information such as DNA, stress and pregnancy hormones, microbiomes, and potentially other indicators of the animal's health and ecology. So this type of research is now taking place on Fin Island. This is Aideen O'Mahony. She's an Irish intern from the University of Glasgow, and she's the drone pilot and does the analysis of the material that's collected. So this information can be used in many ways. One is to learn more about how individuals are related to each other, especially when a tail ID is taken at the same time as the snot collection. So we know a lot about mother and calf relationships, but we know very little about father. So that's some of the information we might be learning. And also this research is much less invasive than other sampling methods, which usually involved shooting darts into whales. And then as well, the overhead drone imagery allows us to calculate the size of each individual, both the length and the width. And this will help us to figure out how well the whales are feeding, interaction between members of groups, and estimation of pregnancy rates. Now, a future study might involve collection of water samples to analyze environmental DNA or eDNA. And this comes from cellular material that's shed by organisms and can be sampled using molecular methods. So this holds a lot of promise for citizen scientists to collect water samples because as well as learning about whales, we might be able to learn about the state of salmon populations on the coast. So I think this is a really exciting new chapter for research. So observing whales takes place both from land and in small boats, and behaviors are documented to learn more about these animals. In coastal waters, it's not uncommon to see a large whale erupt from the water and return with a huge splash. This behavior is called breaching, and sometimes they'll come completely clear of the water. We don't really know why they do this. It might be to lose parasites, to communicate with a loud splash, or maybe it's fun. But I think the communication aspect plays some kind of a role in this behavior, and we'll come to that in a bit. So sometimes there'll be a single breach, and sometimes the whale will breach many times in succession. One of the whales we saw in Iceland goes by the name 60 jumps, and I'm pretty sure it got that name because someone watched it breach 60 times in a row. And I watched them breaching continuously for an hour. Another behavior believed to be a means of communication is peck slapping. And one or both of their long pectoral fins just slaps down on the water. This usually happens multiple times, sometimes with one fin, sometimes with both. They might do both together or one at a time. And here you can see one that's using its pectoral fin in the foreground. If you look carefully in the back, you'll see the whale tail, and I'll just play a little video of that. And then every now and again, you might encounter a friendly whale. I've had 3 experiences where a whale has swum right up to the boat, seeming to want to communicate. Now, of course, we could not approach a whale this closely, but there's no rule preventing them from approaching us. And here you can see one coming right up under the whale. And hopefully, as we continue to study these whales, we'll learn more about how and what they're communicating. Now, I'll also mention that there are some hazards from boats. This whale, whose name is Habit, has a deep slice in her back by her dorsal fin. Unfortunately, it's healed and she seems to be surviving well, but others are not so fortunate. And both ship strikes and fishing gear entanglement are both causes of mortality. So, why do humpback whales come to this area? Well, there's a lot of food in these colder waters. And in order to store up enough blubber to sustain them throughout winter migrations, they eat huge amounts of food each day. And it's not uncommon to see other marine mammals and birds feeding on the same food. So here we see a humpback whale, a stellar sea lion, Pacific white-sided dolphin, and some gulls. And of course, the rainbow is a bonus. Here with some sea lions, with some dolphins and birds, and another dolphin. So how do they go about feeding? Well, there are several different strategies, some of which depend on what they're eating. The 2 major types of food are small schooling fish and krill. So if krill is really highly concentrated, they might simply lunge and gulp their way through the food. Basically, they open their mouths wide and swim through it. So their mouths become like a gigantic scoop, taking in huge amounts of water and any prey it contains. And their throat grooves or pleats expand to make a much larger capture area. So a humpback mouth can hold about 5,000 gallons of water in its mouth. So think about a 12-foot by 10-foot swimming pool, 7 feet deep. Now imagine the weight of that water as the whale breaks the surface. So the water is then pushed out through the baleen by the tongue and the food is swallowed. When whales are in areas of small schooling fish, they might slap the water with their fin or their flukes, and that helps to stun them, and then they can come and swallow their prey. And sometimes with their tail, they might be tossing it from one side to the other. And this technique is used especially when they're feeding on krill. So they want to concentrate it so they can get a better gulp. And it's really amazing that such a large animal eats this tiny prey. But krill are an important food source for some of the huge whales who spend 90% of their waking hours feeding each day. So I got really excited when I saw this pink patch just in front of the tail there, thinking, oh, the whale's organized its krill. But let's take a closer look. It turns out that this is whale poop. It's pink from eating pink food, and whales often poop just as they dive. So with their complex diet of fish and krill, humpback whales produce a lot of poop. And it turns out that they actually eat more than we thought, meaning they recycle the nutrients, i.e. poop, more than we thought. And whale poop is an essential source of nutrients for ocean ecosystems. In particular, iron is made available to smaller ocean creatures such as phytoplankton, which are in turn food for krill. We can kind of think of whales as mobile krill processing plants or fertilizer machines. They inject iron back into the environment, which otherwise would sink to the floor as the krill died. So prior to the time when whales were hunted, there was actually more krill in the ocean than there is now. Now, this may seem like a paradox, but it turns out that more whales and more whale poop means more krill. And phytoplankton absorb carbon and produce oxygen, which means more whales is also good for the global environment. This is the kind of stuff that we geographers just love. Now, let's look at some of the other techniques for catching fish. Sometimes a whale will blow a net of bubbles. There's a single whale that's produced a bubble net. And here you can see the bubbles coming to the surface. And this whale is using a rock wall as one side of its corral. This pair of humpbacks are working together, and it's also common to see 3 or 4 whales working together. So the fish inside the bubble net don't pass through the fizzing curtain, and then the whales just come up the middle with their mouths open. These 2 whales made their net so close to the boat that I looked straight down and saw the bubbles coming up and was just hoping we weren't inside it, and they surfaced right beside us. So look at this video just to see the bubbles rising to the surface. Now, in some cases, larger groups of whales feed together, and where one blows a bubble net and a dozen or so whales lunge through it. The first time I saw this was in Alaska in the 90s. 2 whales breached simultaneously, and then others began to gather into a group. Now, this is where I was talking about breaching as communication, because it really seemed like it was a call to order. We put our hydrophone down and listened to the feeding calls. And it's very much like what is in the next video that I'm going to get Samantha or Justin to play. Number 2, please. So it's one of the most exciting experiences to see a great number of mouths erupt from the water, especially when you can listen to them. There we go. So this coordinated feeding involves a ringleader, and that's the first whale that dives down and blows the bubble curtain, and the herders are corralling the fish, and then the caller, which we heard so wonderfully there, blasts the sound underneath, and that drives the fish up, and then all of the whales come and surface up behind. Now it can be a challenging thing to figure out exactly where they're going to surface, and you could see the camera kind of trying to figure that out. But sometimes birds will notice the little fish jumping at the surface, and they'll head there and direct you to the right spot to look. So Fred Sharp, who studied this behavior in Alaska, likened the group to a social club where there was a specific membership, and each whale had its own place in the circle. Off to the side might be some wannabes who were not members of the club. And what we've learned in the Great Bear is that, early on this behavior wasn't significant, but soon individuals or small groups started to do this, and now there's at least 2 of these large groups working together. And in BC, we're learning that humpback relationships can be long-lasting, with associations of 12 years known for sure. And in this area, bubble netting is now considered a common feeding method, which is different from other areas. So how is this knowledge transmitted? Do mothers teach their calves? Do a group of whales just decide to join up? Did they first learn this because they spent some time in Alaska? Well, there's just really so much we still don't know. And there appears to be more to humpback culture than we first thought. So this graph documents the rise of bubble net feeding in this Great Bear area. And now this increase could be partly because they're spending more time on the water observing, but it's likely a real increase due to this behavior being learned. Now, at the northern end of Vancouver Island is a very different style of feeding, and it's been given the name trap feeding. 2 whales were observed for the first time doing this in 2011. So a humpback sets a trap for juvenile herring when they're in small, kind of diffuse schools. The fish collect near or even in the mouth of the whale to escape predation by diving birds, such as the common murres and rhinoceros auklets you can see here. So the whales then spin, or they use their pectoral fins to push the fish into their mouths. This feeding strategy conserves energy, and typically they use the more energetic lunge feeding when there's a greater concentration of fish. Sometimes 2 whales will trap feed together and herd the fish towards each other. And now there are 26 whales known to trap feed, showing us again the transmission of knowledge among whales. Now this makes for great whale watching, as the whales don't dive. They remain at the surface, but this has also made it harder for researchers to identify the whales. So in this area, they've actually made a whale mouth catalog. Well, I find often in nature my most memorable experiences have come through my ears, and that's certainly true of humpback whales. So various whale research groups have teamed up to establish a hydrophone network, and you can see it covers the whole coast of BC here. It's an important method for studying killer whales because each family has an identifiable dialect. We've already heard the humpback feeding calls, and we'll soon listen to some songs. Now as well, we can document other things such as boat noise, and it's possible to listen from home to some of these hydrophones. So up in the Great Bear, if you take a look at those 4 green ones to the left of Gill Island, those are the Squally Channel Array, and it's part of the SWAG project. That stands for Ships, Whales, and Acoustics in Gitgat Territory. And the goal is to reduce the impact of shipping traffic on whales. And this array of 4 hydrophones can actually pinpoint the exact location of whales that are making a sound. And that's done by calculating how long it takes for the sound to come from the hydrophone to each receiver, and they're able to triangulate it. So this project seeks to understand the noise, how noise levels can interfere with the communities, their communication, feeding and socialization. It also provides a unique educational opportunity for the GitGat to combine contemporary science with their traditional knowledge, and that's to help monitor and manage marine traffic in their traditional territory. So I mentioned that humpbacks sing. Humpback whale song has been described as the most complex of any animal species. It also remains a great mystery. For more than 40 years, researchers have been following this underwater song that shifts and reshapes each season. It can range anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes long and is performed solely by males. Now, it was once thought that whales only sang on the breeding grounds, but we know by listening to the hydrophones that they sing here. Now, because their song changes each year, and all of the whales in an area sing the same song, it's thought perhaps this is where they compose. So who decides how the song will change? How is that communicated? Well, let's take a listen. Now I'm going to get our moderator to play videos 3, 4, and 5, and rather than break in between, I'll just talk about them first. The first song we're going to hear is 2008, and I find it very orchestral. The second one is from 2010, so 2 years later, and I think of it more as a pop song. And then the third one, I mentioned you can listen from your computer. In November last year, I was listening to the Orca Lab hydrophone when a humpback whale was singing, and I just recorded a little snippet of it with my phone. So that's the 2021 song. So videos 3, 4, and 5, please. So singing starts a bit before migration time, which varies from whale to whale. Most of the whales head off to the breeding grounds in Hawaii. A significant number go down to Mexico, and a few head towards Japan. And basically, once they leave our coast, they stop eating. So it takes about 4 to 8 weeks each way to get to their to do their migration, and the females are nursing a calf on the way back. So it's no wonder they spend so much time building up their blubber reserves in our areas. So now I want to talk a little bit about one of the major ways we've learned about humpbacks and their movements, because the underside of each tail fluke is unique, meaning it's like a fingerprint for that whale. By identifying whales as individuals, we can start to learn about them and also to track them. And this is my personal catalog of well over 100 whales. Second whale on the top left is 60 jumps from Iceland. And Yoda is a whale I photographed in different locations on a number of different years. And it's the first whale that I actually got a matching catalog, and I was super excited. And then I couldn't believe that I saw it a third time. And then last fall, we were heading off to do some bear viewing and got the word that where we were going had been washed out. So as we were turning around, I snapped off 4 tail IDs, and I didn't realize until I got back that I got another picture of Yoda. So it turns out that Yoda is a whale that gets around. So here we can see that she's been in Alaska and BC and Hawaii. So this is where we're going to talk about a bit of citizen science. There's a site called Happy Whale, and you can submit your sightings there, and they will get back to you with the ID, and usually my IDs come back within about 24 hours. So I'm going to go through a few whales from the most white to the most black. This is a really beautiful whale, and sometimes different researchers have given them different names. So we don't yet know where this whale goes for the winter, but here it is in the Great Bear Rainforest. Now this one's got a little bit more black in the middle. And back in the old days, we used to take high-speed black and white slides, send them in with GPS locations, and then page through paper catalogs. And now the GPS is in the camera, and they have a really good artificial intelligence that helps to identify the whales. So it's made it much easier. So winter's well documented in both Hawaii and BC over several seasons. And what a great pattern on this whale. It doesn't yet have a name, but you can sponsor a whale and give it a name. And this one goes to Mexico. Now, Mitch has some interesting patterns and also goes down to Mexico. Jupiter is a whale I've seen a number of times, but it's because it's a member of one of those bubble net groups, and they always draw our attention. But check this out. Jupiter's got many documentations, both in Hawaii and BC, but it's also spent time in Alaska. So I wonder if that's where it learned how to do the bubble netting. Now we're getting into the more black tails, but there's still lots of identifiable features. Now, there's not a lot of information on this whale, but also some of the whale researchers may have their own databases that aren't on Happy Whale. So this one was pretty exciting for me. So far, it's considered new to science, and I have the only record for it, which was in Haida. So it was recently given an identity code, and on Happy Whale, you can follow a whale, and then I'll receive a notification if it's sighted by someone else. And I'm always happy to get a Happy Whale notification because it means we have another little piece of the puzzle. So this is another of my new to science whales, and this one I found deep in the Great Bear Rainforest and also with a new identity code. And we mentioned 60 jumps up in Iceland, so I submitted this one, and it turns out that 60 jumps goes to the Cape Verde Islands. This is my personal page on Happy Whale showing the whales I've seen. So some up in Alaska, Haida, Northern Vancouver Island, Hecate Strait, and then a lot in the Great Bear. So just zooming in a little and a little more. And then I also post my sightings on iNaturalist because I want the public to be able to see where whales are, particularly in areas where they could be threatened by something like tanker traffic. So this is an important role that citizen scientists can play to document what's in threatened places, whether they be marine or terrestrial environments. Participating in citizen science gives you connections to the natural world, and I get excited to find out that one of my whales has made it to Hawaii or Mexico, or that they've made it back to their feeding grounds. Humpback whales are amazing, intelligent creatures. We've treated them wrongly for many years, but we have a chance to do better for them now. It's beyond magical to be in their presence, and I hope we can continue to learn more about them and increase our understanding of the amazing world we live in and make it a safer place for them. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Sherry. That's really interesting. Loved, I think I can speak on behalf of everyone who loved the videos and the sounds. I love that butterfly, the one where the whale was sort of had these symmetric movements with both pectoral fins as it lay, I think, on its back doing that. I've never seen anything like that before, and it was so interesting how it was so coordinated. It wasn't just sort of randomly flopping. It looked like it was just some sort of deliberate movement. That was really interesting. I have a question, but there's some questions here as well. And one question we have here from Anne is, in terms of the song recordings you were playing, so we heard humming, but was that from one individual or was that from more than one whale at one time?
It does vary. One time when I was listening to it on the hydrophone, we knew there were 3 whales down below because we'd seen them go down. I know when I'm talking to the researchers, they can tell that, oh, there's 2 whales singing there. I'm not as adept, I don't have that experience. So yes, there can be more than one singing, but typically I think it's a solo type of thing.
Okay, that's good. Question here from Michelle, and Michelle is asking, let me try if breaching is done by whales of all ages, and what about spy hopping?
Okay, so first of all, let me just say that I'm not a whale biologist. I'm a naturalist, so I'm telling you sort of my observations. So I can't specifically answer that. You certainly see young whales doing it a lot, like little baby whales will breach a lot. So, whether it decreases with age, I'm not sure. I think spy hopping probably occurs with any age just because it's a quite a functional thing, but yeah, sorry, I can't really answer that.
That's very interesting. It's actually interesting to hear that you're saying that young whales breach a lot, because I think certainly from my image that we see, the images we see, we always have this idea of a huge whale, a huge humpback throwing stuff. We never see photos of little whales, or I'm not sure when you say young, how young is young, like a 5-month-old whale or?
Still with mom. You see little whales. Yeah, so they're only with mom for just over a year. So yeah, they're in the months.
So they're breaching why they look significantly still smaller than the mother, basically distinguishable. Interesting, because we don't really see that. Very interesting. Michael, who I believe is on the West Coast, Michael is asking, does the nutritional value of their prey differ within the range, sort of in different parts of the range?
Well, there's different food in different areas and also different water conditions. So the reason that the Northern Vancouver Island whales don't bubble net much is apparently because it's very choppy and lots of current there. So the bubbles won't rise straight up. So, it has environmental conditions as well as food. But, obviously they seem to feed on those 2 things, and they have different techniques for the concentration of it. So, but generally that there's more concentration, they're also doing a more energetic thing. So, when their food is sparser, they use a lower energy thing. So I think it all kind of balances out in the end.
Very interesting. Thank you. And thank you, Michael, for that question. Johanna is asking if whales return to the calving grounds where they were born.
I'm pretty sure, yes. Now, there is one theory that maybe back in the day, more whales went to Mexico, and because they were hit so hard by whaling, that either they deviated to Hawaii, or it's just that the Hawaii ones were going further out and getting less whaled. But yeah, I'm pretty sure, and again, I'm not a whale researcher, but I'm pretty sure they would, because they then go back with mom before they leave, that that's their route, that they would stay in the same place that mom was.
That's very interesting. I have a question, if I may ask, about the Hawaii and the southern reaches where the whales are going down, either to Baja or to Hawaii. You've said that the whales aren't feeding on their breeding ground. So they're going to Hawaii. I think, if I understand correctly, the females will bear calves. And is that females who don't have calves will mate?
Yeah, so the mating thing is still a bit of a question. We typically thought that, yeah, they go to Hawaii or Mexico and that's where they breed, and probably they do. But there is a lot of speculation that maybe they do it en route during the migration as well. So this is some of the information that people are still trying to sort out.
All right, very interesting. And another question, if a sort of a sub question of that is, are they going to the warmer climate? So they're going away to calve, they're not feeding. Is it because they prefer to bear calves in the warm water, or is it to avoid predation, or is there some other reason that we can think of, or we can fathom why they're doing those long migrations?
Yeah, and again, I'm not a whale biologist, but I think birthing in warm water, the little baby whale won't have a big blubber supply, and it drinks an enormous amount. I can't remember how many gallons of fat milk every day, but it does have to develop its blubber to be able to get into the colder waters. So I think that might have a big part of it.
That seems to make sense intuitively. I mean, I've been in Hawaii. The water is warm and nice, so that makes perfect sense. Very, very interesting.
I'll do that when I go to Hawaii. I've never been yet.
Oh yeah, well, it's nice. I'll have to I'll vouch for that. I wanted to make a note about the whale that you called 60, or that's called 60 jumps, the whale you saw in Iceland. I don't think there's any further questions for our audience, but I did want to point out that Sherry is leading our Quest Nature Tours departure to Iceland in late June of this year. And if you're interested in investigating that, I've put the link, here are the dates, but I've put a link to the tour page into the chat box if you want to have a look there. If you're interested in joining Sherry, Sherry receives rave reviews for her leadership on our Quest Nature Tours departures. So you can click that link to go directly to that page. Sherry, I want to thank you on behalf of our audience for regaling us with these stories and images and sounds of humpback whales. I think it definitely gives us something to look forward to and think about as well. And I want to thank our audience for the questions. And once again, you will receive a recording of this talk by email in the next couple of days. So feel free to watch again, and feel free to share it with your friends. Once again, thanks very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you.